What's up guys, today on Dirt Lifestyle, we're going to do a basic fabrication project and shine some light on some of the entry-level skills that you will need to start your first fabrication project. I decided to start lumping my welding tutorials into a playlist. I haven't decided what to call the playlist yet, maybe go build stuff or something like that. And it's basically going to be basics that you need in order to start fabricating yourself. I get so many people who contact me that want to get started and they're not sure where to go in order to learn the basic skills. So these videos are going to be aimed directly at you guys, and this one in particular is going to be for someone who has already got their machine and has been sticking metal together and they're ready to start their first fabrication project. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail than I normally do on the decisions that I make along the way, so you can kind of build the confidence that you need in order to do your first fab project too. The project we are working on today is building some fenders for my car trailer. This will be an easy project. The aluminum ones that came with it are not faring well at all to the abuse from occasionally getting knocked around by the 40s on my Jeep. So we're going to build something that's got a little bit of a stronger skeleton and hopefully is going to hold up a little bit longer. Usually your first project is not going to be building custom suspension for your Jeep or something like that. It's going to be building something aesthetic like a fender or a bumper, something along those lines. I'm going to start by making a basic outline with my tape measure as to what I think the fender is going to look like. Then I'm going to transfer that over to the floor, making a template that I can basically follow along with as I'm designing and building this skeleton. Now that I have a template marked out on the floor, I can mark, measure, and cut our first piece of tubing. The tubing that I'm going to use for the skeleton or frame of this thing is just some square tubing. It's very basic, 1.5 inches. I think it's 3/16, somewhere around there. And it should be plenty strong enough for this project. When you buy tubing or you buy plate steel, a lot of times it will come with oil. If you look closer, you can see a little sheen on this. I keep that on there because whenever I'm storing it in the shop, it's so wet here that things like to rust, and I want to keep them from rusting as long as possible. This is something that I won't normally clean off until I'm making my welds and starting my project. I have a center line marked on the tube and I have a center line marked on the floor on our template. And the reason that I do this is because I like to cut something like this just a little bit long, and then the access will just get draped over whenever we make this bend right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a pie cut right there, and then whenever we bend this down and drape it over, we'll have a little bit of extra material, which I definitely prefer over not having enough. This is a speed square. We're going to use this to figure out our pie cut, and the first thing we're going to do is just mark a line that is exactly where we're going to want our bend. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a pie cut in the bottom of our material here, and we're going to leave a little piece of material up top, and we're just going to use that as a hinge. If we take and we hinge it right here, and we line up this line with that line, we can look at these little indication marks and we can see that that is a 45-degree angle. So I got really, at least, I mean, it's like a 46. It's about as close as you can eyeball, I think. So now what we need to do is we need to determine how much to cut out of this in order to bend it. Now, it would be easy to just cut out of the top and bend it and use this as a hinge down here, but the problem is now you've got a big open spot up top. So we need to eat away some material on this side in order to bend it. If we bent it right here where the top of this line is, then it's going to make it to where the bottom of the tube is not going to follow the line. The lines that I made on the floor, I want to be the bottom profile of this tube. So in order to accomplish that, we're going to do some things that are kind of tricky here. So I'm actually going to put this at a 45-degree angle because that's what we want to remove. I am lining up this point right here with the cross section between these two lines, and I'm gonna make a mark right there. Now, what we need to do is split this in half. So we're going to split this in half. So this is going to end up being where we need to hinge this tube from. So this is going to be the piece that we leave, and then we're going to make our pie cut off of the base of that. A speed square is shaped in a 90-degree angle, and if we just marked and cut a 90-degree angle out of this, then it's going to make this a 90-degree angle. So we don't want this to be a 90-degree angle, we want it to be a 45, meaning that we need to do half of this, making it a 45-degree angle. So what we're actually going to do to make this even and easy to figure out, I'm just going to hinge it on this mark. We are going to turn this to half of a 45, and we have about a 23 right there. I would rather cut out a little more than not enough. So actually, you know what? We're going to cut out a 25. So we're going to cut 25 right there is our first cut. And we're going to flip this around. We're going to do the same thing. We've got these little indication marks that we're going to follow, and we're going to turn that to a 25, which is right there. I actually realized I just made a mistake. So this is a 25 right here. So 25 and 25 equals 50. I was looking at the wrong line. I was looking at this instead of this. So that's what I was gonna cut it at, but this is what we're actually gonna cut it at. 25 degrees right there. So all this is gonna go in here, and that should give us enough room to bend a 50, but I've done this enough times to know that you don't want to cut it at exactly a 45, because if your cut's off just a little bit, then you can't quite get that 45 degree angle out of it. So we're gonna cut at a 50, and then we'll just fill the void that's left over. To cut this, I'm gonna be using a tool called a porta-band. Now, this is a portable bandsaw. This isn't ideal to cut angles, but it is definitely doable. It's just one of those things you gotta take your time with. I opt to use this over an angle grinder just because it's not very noisy. I don't have to wear a mask because it's not just blowing dust everywhere, and I just really prefer to use a porta-band anytime I get the chance. This all looks really good, so now we can take a little acetone. We're gonna clean this up and tack weld it. It's really important to clean whatever you're about to weld because you don't want to get any oil or anything into your weld. It'll cause porosity. If you've already been welding, you already know exactly what I'm talking about. It makes a huge difference having a clean surface to weld on than having something that has rust and paint and oil, things like that. So I want to make sure that there's none of that on here. And normally I'll grind down the surface, but this doesn't really need it. I think I'm gonna be able to weld over it just fine. With the inner part of this fender welded, all I really need to do now is make my last cut. And if you look close, you'll see a square. There's a 2x2 square that I drew here, and that represents that 2x2 square right there. So we turn that into a two-dimensional square, and if you look at it, I drew a little line, and that's where I need to make my cut. So once I make my cut on that line, this will set right on top of that. And what my plan is to take some angle iron. I'm gonna cut angle iron to the right length. I'm gonna drill a hole in it, and then I'm going to weld a nut on the inside, and then I'll just basically take a bolt, screw it in from the bottom whenever I want to secure this thing permanently. I need to make 3 more of these real quick, and then we'll get to the next step. The next step is simple. Just need to drill some holes. As you can see, I've got holes marked out on these little chunks of angle iron. So I've got 4 holes to drill, and then need to clean up that material really well and get it prepped to tack weld it. Before I drill any holes, I make a little punch mark right here. If you look close, you'll see a little indentation. And what that does is it makes it to where this drill bit won't walk around as easily whenever you start your hole. So it starts out like this with a little punch mark. Then I put the little 1/4-inch bit through, and then I drill it full size. And you'll notice this is a little bit wet because I use cutting oil. This is cutting oil right here. I like this stuff because it foams up. It just makes it to where it cuts through a lot easier. It makes it where your drill bits last longer and things like that. So it's definitely worth having, but this is something that you have to make sure you clean completely before you weld anywhere near it, because this will definitely cause porosity in your welds. Let's take a minute and talk about how to prep material. We've got this cutting oil that is left all over the surface of all this stuff, and we need to flap disc it. And before we flap disc it, we want to use acetone. The reason why is because if you just start flap disking over this, this actually gets kind of hung up and absorbs up into this. And then whenever you clean things in the future, you're just going to be applying more of this cutting oil on future projects. So we don't want to do that. We're going to clean it up with acetone first, then we're going to clean it up with the flap wheel, and then I'm going to clean it up with acetone one more time before I bolt it down so we can start tacking onto it. I found some nuts and bolts that fit this hole perfect, so I bolted it all together, tack welded the nut, and then cut the access off because I know I'm going to be having a little ramp going right over the top of this, and I would hate to bolt it in and put a nice big dent in my new fender. Now I'm going to figure out where to tack this chunk of frame to. I'm going to line it up, and I'm going to square it up using the speed square. You've been seeing me use it throughout this episode, and I use these a lot whenever I build, so all I'm going to do is get that bad boy on there. I might use a magnet or two to hold it in place, and then I will use this to square it up, make sure that it is nice and straight before I start tacking things together. This is where this project's gonna get really interesting. We've basically established all the stuff that is easy and concrete, and now we are gonna mess with what I haven't figured out how to do yet. I have a basic plan, but we're winging it at this point, to be honest. I need to make a cut here and here because we're doing a compound pie cut. So we've already established one pie cut, and I welded one side to keep it there, and we're gonna use this as a hinge to then cut our next pie cut so we can turn this. We don't want it to twist on us, which is why we welded this side of the hinge first. And so yeah, I'm just gonna open this up so we can turn it in order to give ourselves a taper, because I think a taper is gonna be a better look between here and here than just keeping it flat. So the next step is gonna be opening up this other pie cut. We're gonna tack weld it on here, and then I can kind of pull that over and mark where I need to make the cut down here on the bottom where this angle iron is. I gotta be honest, I think that looks like crap. We are not gonna do it this way, but that's why you tack stuff together, just in case you need to pull it back apart. I just don't like that taper. In my head, that taper looks awesome, but I'm used to using round tube, and I think round tube gives you a little more forgiveness whenever you're doing angles and stuff like that, and for whatever reason, I just don't like the way it looks. So I'm gonna straighten it back out. This one I already kind of pulled out to see what it looks like. This will be an easy fix. I'll show you some tricks on how to weld a huge gap, and with a MIG welder, it's pretty damn easy. I've got our piece of material anchored to the table, and this is just to keep it from flopping around while we work on it, and I can verify that everything's flat whenever it's anchored like this. So all we're gonna do is we're gonna take a piece of welding rod, we're gonna lay it across this valley, and we're gonna tack weld it in. And if I think I need to fit another piece in there, then I'll lay another piece in there, and I'll do the same thing. But all we're trying to do is give this a little bit of material, so as we're tack welding everything, it doesn't try to fall in, because if you've done any welding, you've burned through. All of us have. It's real easy to burn through because you want it to be hot enough to join everything together, but you don't want it to be so hot that it just falls through and you got a big open hole in your material that you don't have to refill with your weld. So I think that this helps a little bit, and I'll show you exactly how I do it. Apparently my camera wasn't recording. There's the finished product. I'm gonna have to show you on this other side. This is actually a bigger gap, so this will be a little more of a challenge, and I'll show you exactly how I do this. That is just a series of tacks in a row, and now I'm going to do one final hot pass. Before I do the hot pass, I'm going to clean it up with my wire brush a little bit. That is looking way better. I'm much happier with that. And they seem pretty stout so far. I mean, I've only partially welded them, but I can grab a hold of this bad boy and I can move that around and just shakes the whole trailer. So I think we're definitely on the right track. Now we need to cut the skins for these. I like to have the reveal in just a little bit. So instead of doing a full 11 inches, we're gonna cut it at 10 inches and basically have like a 1/2 inch reveal on each side. I think that would look the best, and then it gives you just a little bit of space for some welds. The skins for our fenders are gonna be made out of this 1/16 inch diamond plate. I think that this is the perfect material for this job, and I'm gonna be cutting it with a plasma cutter. I've got a basic layout of where we need to make our bends to make this fit that fender. We're going to be using a tool called a press brake. The press brake that I own is from a company called Swag, and Swag makes a whole bunch of different fabrication tools, and one of the tools that I have from them is this press brake. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's close enough for me to work with it, and I mean, that's a nice sharp bend. These fenders are really starting to come together, and there's only one major step left, and that is finish weld. It is late, but I got all the welding done, so let's take a look and see how it turned out. These fenders are cooling off a little bit from all the welding, but they're all put together. I wouldn't recommend welding all the way along, you know, the inside and outside of everything whenever you're building something that's mostly aesthetic like this. It doesn't really need it. I basically just added weld where I felt like it needed it. All the tube is welded all the way around, but anywhere that it's just like the skin of the fender, I don't think it's necessary. So on the top side, I've got a weld here, I have a weld in the middle, and then I have a weld on the outside. And then on the inside, I have one in between here, one between there. And they don't rattle or anything like that, and that's really the only reason you would try to weld something all the way through. But if I was to try and weld this all the way down, not only is that a waste of wire, but it also, you will slowly warp whatever it is that you're building whenever you have a big continuous weld like that. I also measure, so I put a center line here, center line on the other side, measured out 5 inches, and that way it's the same on both fenders, inside and out. I'm not going to document this next part of the process because it's just grinding and painting, and to be honest with you, I wouldn't want to watch that. I assume a lot of you wouldn't want to watch that. And to be really honest with you, I am exhausted. I need to get this done and to get the first coat of paint on. So tomorrow I can bolt the fenders on my trailer, because the day after that I'm going to leave to Southern California for King of the Hammers. For those of you who are new fabricators, keep in mind that not everything you make has to be a masterpiece. You know, I could have TIG welded these fenders together and made them look all super tricked out, but sometimes you need to just build stuff that is functional and serves a job. That's exactly what this was. I needed to get it done. I figured it'd be a good opportunity to show you guys some of the basics that I use in the shop in order to make a project go smoothly and in order to overcome minor obstacles that are in your way. But don't put too much pressure on yourself and get discouraged. This should be a really fun process. Fabrication is really creative. It's an amazing outlet, and I encourage all of you to start doing it. Anyone who is still with me at the end of this video, that means you're probably pretty interested. So I hope that you learned something from this video, and I do plan on doing more stuff like this and getting into the basic nuts and bolts of how I do things. Most of the videos on my channel, I kind of skim through the small stuff just to keep the video moving and keep it interesting, but I do want to start addressing some of these basic skills just to make it easier for you guys who are getting started. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you like things like this, and if you don't follow me on social media, I'm at Dirt Lifestyle Nate. We'll see you next time.